Hi there, Lindsay here, the Frugal Crafter. Today we're going to draw a cardinal in watercolor, and we are going to use some paint from our sponsor, Ochre. They have a set of 24 tube watercolor paint that's very affordable and comes with 6 watercolor brushes. So it's a great beginner starter set if you're interested in watercolor but you don't want to spend a lot of money. And you can use a ceramic plate from your kitchen for mixing if you want. I'm using the ceramic palette here, and I've already squirted out my colors, and I'm going to show you what I'm choosing for colors today. And the first thing I recommend you do whenever you're getting a new set of watercolors is to swatch them out so you see how they really look. So the colors we're going to use today are burnt umber, we're using Paynes gray, hooker's green, emerald green, ultramarine blue, crimson red, that gorgeous crimson cardinal color, and some yellow ochre. We might not even need all of these, but I thought it would be nice to have them out and ready to go. You can sketch on with a pencil or whatever you like. I'm going to use a watercolor pencil mainly because I want to draw it a little bit darker than I typically would if I was drawing a pencil with a pencil, and I want to make sure you can see it. And I'll pop the reference photo up into the corner here so that you can see as we go along. Now just to show you here, you want 2 buckets of water, one for cleaning your brush and one for getting fresh water. I like this divided bucket. I mean, I've had it for like 20 or 30 years. The side with the ridges is good for cleaning my brush, and then the side with the brush rests on it is good for getting out fresh water. So that's what I like to use, but 2 spaghetti sauce jars will work just fine. We're going to start off by sketching our cardinal, and I'm going to start with an oval shape. I like to draw really light at first until I'm sure I got it the right size and the right shape. Okay, so it kind of looks like a potato shape here. And then off of that, I want you to put like a little bit of a triangle, just like that, okay? And then I want you to put a line off of that for the tail feathers. And I'll outline this a little bit so you can see. I know it can be difficult to see. Now, I haven't taped my paper down because I am going to kind of leave a rough edge, but you can tape this down if you feel like your paper is going to buckle on you. Okay, I don't need to put every detail in, but I do want to just kind of make sure I've got what I need. Now off the oval, we got to get the head, which kind of comes off like this and has a crest, a cardinal crest there, which I'm just sketching in. Now this is a watercolor pencil, so what's going to happen when I start to paint, this color is going to dissolve. So it's real important if you're going to use a watercolor pencil that you use a pencil color that's going to go with what you're doing. So, you know, if you used a gray, you want to make sure that you account for the fact that you're going to be getting gray in your design. So I'll make sure I have this big enough. But any of the lines I don't want, will simply dissolve away. I'm going to fatten them up a little bit here. And let's see, I don't want to do the feet with the red watercolor pencil because the feet are very almost like a pale gray. But I do want to get the wings in here. I'm just going to kind of divide up the area because the cardinal's going to have like kind of more reddish fluffy feathers up on the head and chest, and then it gets more longer feathers as you go into the wing. So I want to go ahead and get that wing in there. And I don't need a ton of detail, I just need to get the basic shapes here. Now, I am going to switch over to my pencil just to draw the, because it's kind of on a branch. I'm kind of sitting on a thicker branch. It could be a fence, like the edge of a fence. It's completely up to you, whatever you want to. I think I'll probably even throw in a few little branches that aren't in the reference photo, just because I like to have, I don't know, I like to put some details in there sometimes. So we got the leg kind of coming down like that. Little toes here. You can see 3 toes on this foot, and on this one we're seeing a little bit more of the leg than we're just seeing the foot on that one. We're seeing a little bit more of the leg here, tucking out from the back of the bird and the top of the foot, and then we've got the middle toe. You can see a little bit of this toe on that side. You can see the back claw a little bit there, and I think you had a little foreshortening of a front claw right there. You really can't see too much of it. I actually think this might need to be a little bit longer. But I don't think we're going to put a lot of detail in there. I just wanted to make sure I had that info in there. Now that is a little bit dark, so I'm just going to go in and just lighten that up with my eraser a little bit. I just wanted to have that bit of information in there. Now I want to clear off any crumbs from my picture, so I'm just going to brush away any eraser crumbs. I'm not going to put the eye in yet. If you do want to put the eye in yet, well, we could put it in with our pencil. I don't want to do it with the red because it's going to smear too much, but I can go in and get that nice big eye in there, and I can also make a note of where the highlight is so we don't have to go back in later. We can just paint around it. And I think I'll be putting some greens in the background, kind of fuzzy eventually. All right, so we're going to start off. I'm going to start off by wetting the bird. I'm going to use my largest brush here, which is a number 10 filbert shape, and I'm just going to go in and I'm going to wet it, and that's going to liquefy my my watercolor pencil. So it'll help me get rid of any of those lines. You can use whatever watercolor paper you have handy. I'm also going to wet the beak to make sure I get that shape right. They've got a very distinct kind of rounded triangle shape. I don't want to get rid of all of my lines. I just want to kind of soften them a little bit and get rid of any, I want it to look kind of just naturally painted when I'm done. These are synthetic brushes. They'll hold their shape really well, and if you are buying these for kids, they're very durable. Your golden hair brushes are much more durable than your like softer, like camel or pony brushes that often come in kids' watercolor sets. These will hold their shape much better and last a lot longer. Okay, so while that's wet, I'm going to start grabbing some color. I want to grab some yellow ochre. So since this is right from the tube watercolor, I got to add water to it because it's going to be too strong to use on its own. So I'm going to go in and add that in around here where we've got more of a warmer color. And just kind of let it flow. I like to let the mixing happen on the paper if I can, especially if I'm going for more of a loose look. I'm still staying with this big brush because I want to work wet into wet. Now I'm going to grab some of the, I'm going to clean my brush in the dirty water. I can pick up fresh water from the clean side. You also want to have paper towels or a rag handy to blot your brush on, or to even blot your paper if you get too much color. Now I'm going to grab just some of the red on its own. Make sure that when you're adding water, that you're not getting big clumps on your brush, because that can cause some problems, because then you'll get like a big clump on your work and it'll be difficult to dissolve afterwards. It's much harder to dissolve it once it's on the paper. Because the only red we have on there so far, other than what I just put on, was from the watercolor pencil. So if you did it with a graphite pencil, you wouldn't have any red until you put this color on. And I'm just putting in some pretty broad strokes here. And the paper I'm working on is Hahnemühle Cezanne watercolor paper. I do want a little bit more red in here so that when I work into it with other colors, I will have that base of the red. Okay, now I'm going to actually grab a little bit of this ultramarine blue without cleaning my brush off. And I'm going to add some of that into the back. That's probably a little strong. Add a little water to that. And I'm going to add some of that into the back of the bird. It's picking up some sky color. And I'm going to kind of dab it in there so it does keep a little bit of that soft feathery texture. And I can add a little bit of that onto the chest. Okay, it's coming along here. Something I'm noticing right now is I have too much yellow in there. I need to blend that in with a little more red, so I grab some of the red. I might mix in a little bit of the yellow, red on the palette, and just kind of feather that in there. Feather in the feathers. I don't want it too yellow. Okay. Oh, you know, I think I could also use some of that yellow with a clean brush here into my wing feathers. All right, next I want to grab a little bit of the Paynes gray. Which this Paynes gray is less blue than other Paynes grays that I've used, so you just kind of keep that in mind if you're using this for the first time and you're used to other Paynes grays. You can see that's got a much more neutral tone to it. It's definitely more of a gray, like almost like a black even. I'm giving a little bit in the shadow areas here. A lot of times your Paynes gray has more of a blue undertone. That's why I put some, actually I probably wouldn't have needed that. I could just use a burnt umber and burnt sienna together. But I was curious. I wanted to see how that color behaved. All right, maybe a little bit more of that in there. I like this brush, this filbert shape, because it gives kind of like that natural feather look when I just kind of stamp it down on the paper. I think that's really going to help me get a lot of that that effect. So I'm going to clean off my brush good. And now I'm going to grab one of these smaller rounds. This one right here. Let's see, it looks like about a number 4. Oh, it's a number 6 round with a nice point. And while I'm at it, I'm just going to thin down some of that Paynes gray. Quite thin. And I'm going to go in and just paint the feet while I'm at it, because I'm doing a fairly loose look here. Okay, so now I'm going to take this brush rather, go back to the Paynes gray, but a little bit thicker. I just want enough water on my brush to make the paint flow. And I am going to go right in under the beak, and see it's going to bleed back a little bit, but that's okay because I want a soft look. I am going to add some of those little wispy feathers under the throat here. So I'm using my brush straight up and down and just kind of dragging out some feathers. Actually, something that's going to work a little bit better for this is a cut up piece of old gift card. I like to use this a lot when I'm watercoloring, because I can pull out much finer little hairs or feathers. Be really hard to get a brush to do that. I'm going to bring that up and around the eye, and it's not going to bleed into the eye area because it's only going to go where the paper is wet. I like to do a lot of my painting wet into wet because I just feel like it gives it a nice soft look, and it gives it a natural look. I can just kind of even put in that little bit of line between the top and bottom part of the beak. And I can also very carefully, with a very concentrated brush, you know, not a lot of water on it, I can go in and paint around the little highlight in the eye. And get that in there too. Okay. Now I'm just seeing if there's any other portions of the feathers that I want to do at this point while everything is still wet. So whatever I do now, it's going to blend. So if I go in here and I add some of this Paynes gray with this fine tip brush, it is going to bleed out a little bit. So you want to do this only in areas where you want that softness. Once it dries, you can go in and add more sharper detail. I think it's nice to have a variety, to have some soft edges and some hard edges. But if you're feeling nervous, then you can always let it dry and then go back in. And The only thing is that when you do that, you do lose some of the spontaneity of the watercolor because you're going in a very controlled fashion. So I like to go in and flick in these little kind of feathery bits while everything's just a little bit damp. Just make sure you don't have too much water on your brush, because if you have too much water on your brush, that's where you get blooms and blossoms. Now I'm going to take a little bit of red, a little bit of that Paynes gray, a little bit of the ultramarine blue. That's going to give me a dark that's got a little bit of a purple tone to it. And add some of that in there too. Now on the reference photo there isn't a lot of color, but I want to do some green because that's really going to make the bird pop, and we'll work on that in a few minutes. Now I feel like I'm getting too fussy there, so what I'm going to do is take this big brush. I'm just going to blot off the extra moisture there and just kind of soften what I've got going here. I think I want to add a little bit more red. Okay, that might be a little too concentrated. We'll see here. Oh, no, maybe not. And see, since I don't have a lot of water in my brush, I can almost put in these individual little hairs. As long as your brush is drier than what's underneath, you shouldn't get blossoms. And I like being able to throw in those more distinct, like swashes of color. And some more of that yellow ochre in there too. That really gives it a warmer tone. I think I will grab some yellow ochre on this pointed brush. I think it's just stained. I don't think it's the brushes will get stained with the paint. Just watch out for any beads of water on your brush, because that can cause trouble. And kind of with a fairly dry brush in the paint, I'm going in and adding just some more warmth here in some spots. And I'm going to mix it in with a little bit of the red, a little darker on the bottom beak. I think I want a little bit of red with this brush in to accentuate the feathers up there. I only want it wet enough so that the paint will flow, because I don't want to end up with the blossoms in my bird. I can work around in this black area too. It's still wet, it's still malleable. And I think I'll just add a little bit of definition to the underside of the feet there. Alright, we're going to let this dry, and when we come back we'll do the background. Welcome back. Let's work on the background. We have a couple different shades of green here. We've got our hooker's green that looks kind of like an olive green, and we've got some emerald green, which is just a really bright, more saturated, more high chroma green. And what we're going to do is just a little bit of a spot background here. So I'm going to start up here. I'm just going to wet right up to the bird, trying not to really touch it. And then I can even take my spray bottle and just kind of give it a little spritz out. And that will help soften a little bit. I just don't want any puddles. And then I'm going to pick up the color. I think I'll start with this kind of more of the hooker's green and just kind of add some of that color in there next to the bird and let it kind of fade out. And I can add a little bit of the other green, and I can even add some blue ultramarine blue. This is gonna be kind of a duller. If I mix it with the green, it's gonna get a little duller. I'm going to give it a little spray here to help it flow. Now, if you get your bird wet, it can run a little bit, so just kind of be real careful about that. Oftentimes I'll put my backgrounds in first, but I wasn't sure if I wanted, like how much I wanted, if I wanted a full background or if I just wanted to have a little bit. So I'm kind of doing kind of like a lost and found background here, which is when you've got kind of like just a little bit of a fadey background happening, which is a nice effect on watercolor sometimes. I'm just going to blot, kind of let that fade away. I think it's kind of a pretty effect. Could bring a little bit more in here if I want. Now I have to be careful around the black area there, because that could bleed out pretty easily. So I'm just going to gently just kind of tap in there, and then I'll spread it out with my brush. And I could go in and add a little bit more green over here if I want to. This is where you can really play and have fun. Another fun practice thing to do if you're new to watercolors is to make bookmarks. Like you could chop a piece of paper up like this into a bunch of strips and then make, just do some little painting practices on bookmarks. That's also really fun. Now I'm going to go over here and add a little bit of color. I'm just going to wet the area a little bit where I want my color. And I like to think of the shapes and the colors that I have all done already. So here I have some green, so I think of that green being connected behind the bird over here. Blot off excess, and I can go in there and just fill in a little bit. And then I'm just going to give this a little spritz. And just let it kind of flow a little bit. I'm not going to leave any puddles though, because puddles will turn into blossoms. So if you have a puddle, you can blot it. And I think I do want a little more blue, because I like that blue there, and I think it'd be pretty to have some over here. So I'm going to add it kind of in this corner area and pick it up behind the tail over here. And it's okay to let some white show in too, because that will, give your eyes space to rest and look nice. And I like using the sprayer because I feel like it just gives me a really natural looking edge. And you can just blot. That will give it a little texture too if you want. You can give it some like cloudy mottled texture by blotting. And then under the branch, I'm going to do the same thing, except I'm just going to go ahead. I don't have to be so careful because I don't have to worry about the, I don't have to worry about getting into the red at all. So I can just go in with my colors pretty easily. He's high in a tree, so there would be some sky and some trees all around. And by having the color a little more concentrated at the bottom, it'll give a little bit of weight to the drawing and make it, or the painting, and make it feel a little bit more natural. All right, now for the branch, I'm going to start off with just a little bit of burnt umber. I'm going to put it in there kind of streaky. Then I'm going to grab some ultramarine blue. Can add in some even darker streaks. And I want to put a nice shadow under the bird, so I'm going to go in with that darker tone. You can add a little Paynes gray to it. Just got to make sure I go around the feet a bit. I don't want to completely lose the feet in my shadow. but I don't need to keep them really detailed either. And I'm actually going to just kind of drag some of that color around to fill in the rest. I don't really want this to smear into the background, because if the bird's in focus, so will this branch will be too. There's definitely quite a strong blue light on the branch, so I'm going to get that in there. And I do want to add some other branches kind of coming off the tree, but I gotta wait till the background dries before I can do that. Alright, to add some texture to that branch, I'm going to go back to my credit card scraper. And I can use the sharp edge. I can even scrape a little bit, like scrape with the flat side of it to like lift up paint and get highlights. I have several different pieces of credit card that I use for stuff like this. So I can scrape out color, I can drag in color, I can drag in scratches. It's a really wonderful tool. And it gives you that random effect that bark has. Alright, I'm going to let this dry at this point, and then we'll come back and we'll add our final details and really bring everything into focus, because right now it looks a little messy. Alright, everything has had a chance to dry. I like how the background is nice and soft and doesn't take any attention away from the bird. That's really what you want in the background. I'm going to go with one of these smaller flat brushes. This is actually, I'd say, about a 1/4 inch angle, or number 2 angle. I'm going to grab some of the burnt umber. Now I'm having my my branch here be a little bit more brown than the one in the photo, because the one in the photo is very gray and weathered. It almost looks kind of like it's like dead wood kind of, and I want more of a little bit more of a life to this. So I like these angles because the angled brushes, because I can like kind of like twist and turn my brush and get some, you know, some nice shapes that way. You just get kind of more of an organic look, for lack of a better term. And I can kind of put some textures in on the bark. And I can add a little bit of Paynes gray here. I'm not a big, like, I only put out a small bit of paint on my palette. Now, if this dries, I can re-wet it and reuse it till it's all gone. But I don't put a ton out. That way I don't have to clean my brush every time. I like to sometimes have paint on my brush and go into the next color, because having that bit of a dirty brush mixing going on, it just gives me a little bit more of a natural look to my paint. And then, I don't know, I just think it looks a lot more realistic, a lot nicer. And I think I'm going to actually throw a couple little leaves onto that little branch. And you'll notice that I turn my paper all around while I'm working. And the reason I do that is because I find it's so much easier to pull a stroke towards me, and it just gives me a lot more control. Like, I'm going to pull this, I'm going to turn this right around, and I'm going to do this branch. I'm just going to have it kind of upside down as I'm working. I have that kind of dark, so I'm going to add some more dark elsewhere. So it's just basically making everything kind of fit and belong. But don't be afraid to turn that paper around. If you, if maybe your paper tends to wrinkle and warp a lot on you, maybe you're using a thinner paper, you can tape it down to like a piece of cardboard or foam core or a piece of wood, cutting board, anything like that you have. And just try to get one that's about the same size as your paper, or maybe just a little bit larger, so that you can move it around in the space that you have on your desk. It's really going to make a big difference on like your enjoyment of painting. Now I guess I probably could have taped this down because I did end up going all the way to the edge. I wasn't intending to. I was actually going to go for more of a dreamy look with this, but then I ended up making it a lot more solid than I had imagined. But that's what happens sometimes when you're painting. You have one idea in mind, and then by the time you finish painting it, you've done something completely different. That's totally fine. That's how paintings go sometimes. I want a little more shadow and darkness on the bottom of my branch, so I'm taking the burnt umber, some ultramarine blue, and some of the Paynes gray, just getting a darker color. And again, I'm still using the same brush, so that, because I just find this really easy to use for the for getting that really, really natural look here. I'm just gonna pull out that branch a little bit longer. Oh, maybe a little bit more of that. And you can add it slowly. And the fact that we have that kind of that base layer with our scratching that we did on there, it just gives it a really nice, gives us a really nice base, so that whatever we put on top is going to look really nice. So now I think we'll add a few little individual leaves. And I'm just going to use the same brush because I really like that brush. I'm going to double load my brush. And I'm going to do, I'm going to load it up with the emerald green, which is my brighter, lighter green. Okay, see the whole brush is loaded up with emerald. Then I'm going to take the tip of that brush and I'm going to dip it in the hooker's green. And that should give me kind of a two-tone effect. And I'm going to turn my paper to however it's more comfortable for me to do this. I'm going to lay my brush down so the tip is pointing towards the branch, and I'm just going to press and lift. And I get a pretty little leaf like that. Press and lift. Press and lift. This is a nice little brush. Gonna reload. Let's see, I might need to wash my brush actually. Oh, I'm still getting a two-tone. Look how pretty that is. Isn't that nice? Now don't worry if your branches don't, your leaves don't meet up to the branch perfectly, because the viewer's eye will fill in the difference. There, I like that. I've got two groups of three. Our brain likes things that are in odd numbers. I'm going to clean my brush off because I did have the color creeping, but hopefully you can see there we've got like a nice two-tone effect on our leaves. Just give it, it does a highlight and shading all in one. So again, load up in the lighter green. And I'm going to get the tip of the brush in the darker green. And we'll do a few of these down here as well. A little bit much on that. Put one right here. Now I need to reload because you can see I'm running out if I want to add more. I think that's actually fine. Now I'm kind of disappointed with how I did the feet or how I did the branch around the feet, because I lost a lot of the definition. So I'm going to see if I can lift out some of the paint that I have there. I'm going to take this small flat brush and I'm going to try to just kind of scrub out a little bit. I don't know if this is stiff enough to do that. Sometimes with student grade paints, you can lift a little easier with them because of the binders that they have in them. So I'm just going to try to scrub a little bit here. I'm able to get a little bit out, but I'm probably going to end up just taking a colored pencil or a pen and adding highlights to the feet to make them show up more. And while we're at it, we can actually do that technique on some of the feathers here if you want to have any lighter areas. So rather than using white at this stage, you can use white, but I like to try this first because often if using the white of the paper, you just get a more vibrant look. I do intend on grabbing some of the Chinese white to see about adding maybe a little detail around the eye. A little bit of highlight here. You always want to blot when you're lifting. I want to have blot a little bit off the beak too. And you'll decide. I think it's good to learn how to use the white of the paper as your white, But sometimes it just, you know, it makes sense for the painting that you're doing to grab the tube of white paint. It's completely up to you, and you can experiment with both methods and see, you know, what you like the looks of where. So that's what we have so far. I think I will put out a little bit of white paint. I'm going to twirl my palette around here. And now the Chinese white is not a really opaque white. It's meant more for mixing so that you can soften the intensity of your colors without adding a lot of opacity. It's kind of more so you can just control the colors. So kind of keep that in mind. It's not going to like really cover up anything. If you look at my swatch here of the Chinese white, see, I took a streak of marker first, and then I painted the colors over it. You can see that it's not really that opaque. It's more for toning down your colors, because sometimes if you have to mix a color with so much water to get the color, the pastel color that you want, it can be very runny and hard to control. So that's what that is for. That's why I left that area of the eye unpainted. But I do want to have a little bit of a reflection around or a little bit of a highlight around the eye. And I didn't leave it, so I can do that with a Chinese white. And it's not so bright that it's going to make your, you know, make your painting look crazy or anything. Now I'm also going to go here and I'm going to fix my leg, or attempt to anyway. This might not even be strong enough to fix the leg, but I don't really need to do too much. I just need to kind of give the impression of where the feet are, because when I went around it with the bark, I really kind of messed it up. Now the only downside is I find that like Chinese white is kind of cool in temperature, so sometimes it can look almost like too bluish. So you might need to add like a little bit of yellow ochre to it or something to make it look just right. I'm not happy with that leg, but honestly, I'm not happy with the way it looks in the photo either. So I might just have to leave it. I am gonna add a little bit of yellow ochre to that because it just looks too cool to me. Now, I think I will maybe add a little bit of a highlight in the beak. Gotta add a little water to that because it's not wanting to flow off my brush. And let's see if I want any of this in the wings. I don't think it would hurt to have a little bit, because it's a translucent white. I can go in and I'm going to be able to see all of the color underneath. And because it's a little bit on the cool side, and we have the purple tones in there because we have sunlight, even though we think of sunlight as warm because we sit out in the sun and it's nice and warm, sunlight's actually cool. It's a little bit more on the cool side. Definitely from compared to indoor light, unless you have daylight corrected bulbs. So getting that in there will actually work just fine. And any place you want to just bring a little attention, that highlight will grab your eye. So you can go in and add that. Well, I think that's a little too much, so I'm going to blot it with my finger. It probably will dry a little bit more transparent. I'm actually hoping so with the feet, because the feet are a little bit... I'm not very happy with the feet. I think, actually, I will take some of my brown here, my bark color. I think I might actually try to refine them a little bit that way. And I think that foot should have more of a shadow on it as well. So I think I'll probably just kind of tone that down with a little bit of a shadow. Grab some ultramarine blue so I can get that cool kind of shadow over it. Because I have it way too light, and there should be more of a shadow on this leg too. That's way too blue. But I can adjust it. I think that's a little bit better. Still a little on the blue side there. Grab a little yellow ochre, a little brown. Actually grab the brown on its own. There's an awful lot of fussing that we do in our paintings, so don't feel bad if you find that you're fussing a little bit. I think I'm going to leave this and come in with a colored pencil or a pen and make it a little bit sharper. And speaking of pens, if you want to do a little detail around the face, using a pen is a great idea. I'm just going to grab a couple of Micron pens here and make sure it works. Make sure your paper's dry. That one I think is a little dry. I like the number 3. It's a 0.03 millimeter. I find that size works really well. Now these are waterproof, so you can actually do your sketching with them and go over them. But if you want to do like any little flicks of hair, this is going to work really well for that. You can also refine the eye if like maybe your highlight was a little wonky. You can throw in a couple little details that way. All right, I'm gonna let this dry, and then we can come back, add a little colored pencil to sharpen it up, and we will be all done. Okay, let's wrap this one up. I have got this kind of peachy colored pencil that I'm gonna use just to add a little bit of detail to the feet, because I kind of botched them royally, and I just want to get them kind of in there, but I don't want to really draw a lot of attention to them because they're just kind of weird. And then if you want, you can take a black pencil, sharpen up any areas you need to sharpen. Pencils are so nice over watercolor. You don't have to have anything expensive. They're going to work on top great because watercolor paper has a little bit of a tooth to them. And it will just grab the color, and even with inexpensive pencils you'll get a really nice effect. I'm adding any little details with this black because the Cardinals do have quite a bit of that dark coloring on their back. Don't go too overboard with it. You know, you don't want to redraw the entire thing. You just want to give it a little bit of a bit of depth. I'm going to do a little orange. Oops, that was a little strong. I'm going to do a little bit of orange in here. And this is actually one of my favorite techniques for when I'm using a student grade watercolor, because it just really lets you amp up any of the color that you like, and it lets you adjust without lifting up what's underneath. I'm gonna layer up a little bit of orange over this red. And the other thing is, I like to use colored pencils, but I don't like to use colored pencils like for the entirety of a painting or drawing. So doing it like this lets you have the best of both worlds. It lets you have that that immediate drawing feeling. It lets you have the control and detail. But by doing a watercolor base underneath, you get so much more done in so much less time. All right, I think I'm going to call that done. I hope you enjoyed this tutorial. Please give me a thumbs up if you did, and all the supplies will be linked down below. Thank you so much for watching. Until next time, happy crafting.